You are in for a treat today on the Therapy Dogs Australia podcast because we had the opportunity to chat with the fantastic Dr Jane Remington-Gurney, a certified and practicing speech-language pathologist based in Queensland who also happens to work alongside Charlotte, her wonderful therapy dog. In this episode, Jane discusses the benefits of having a therapy dog in her practice, the ways in which Charlotte contributes alongside Jane's communication programs, as well as the fascinating ways in which dogs can teach us to communicate with each other more effectively. A little heads up for those listening to the podcast rather than watching it, there are references to slides during our chat with Jane, so you can watch this episode on YouTube if you'd like to see what Jane is referring to. We hope you enjoy this incredibly enlightening podcast. Okay, well, welcome to another episode of Therapy Dogs Australia podcast. Today we are very lucky. We've got a very special guest with us today, Jane and Sam as well. Welcome, both of you.
Thank
you.
Hello. So, Jane, how about we start? I'll start sharing my screen and we can start with an intro that way.
Okay, I'm going to go through some slides, but I promise it's not going to be death by PowerPoint. So I'm going to start and stop. And if there are any questions, just let me know. Essentially, I have only recently started to have a clinical therapy dog as a tool, if you like. It's actually referred to in the literature sometimes as the glue that sticks a session together. And I think that can be very true when it comes to speech therapy in particular. But I need to say that although I'm a speech therapist, I didn't always want to be a speech therapist. I actually wanted to work with animals. And I did everything in my power to work with animals. And that was all the work experience, the kennel cleaning, everything I could get. So when I had to go and see the careers officer at high school, I didn't really want to see her. I knew exactly what I was going to do. But she turned around and said, "You can't do that. That's man's work. Go and have a look and see what speech therapy is about."
Wow.
So I'm afraid I'm from that generation where I also was not allowed to study Latin, which I needed for vet work, because it was only offered at the boys' high school up the hill. And I was the only girl at the girls' high school who wanted to go. And you can't trust those boys, etc., with one girl going up the hill for Latin lessons. So I went to see what speech therapy was about, and here I am. Except I went to work in Canada first, and in Canada I was exposed to a lot of severe communication impairment, as it was known then. So these are people who have little or no functional speech. And I actually seemed to find my niche there. And that could be because I was also very, very well trained, I suppose, in dance, and dance teaches you to observe. So I was observing a lot through that aspect of my life, and I was learning how to help people with communication disabilities in another, and the two merged. The bit that was missing was the dog. So the dog became just companionship and something that I enjoyed doing dog obedience with. And my speech therapy seemed to take off into increasingly working with people with challenging behaviors, people who had severe physical disabilities, and people who were able to understand but not able to express themselves at all well. When I arrived in Australia, I worked for the Cerebral Palsy League and headed up the department there. And then I went overseas and did some speech therapy in the Solomon Islands and came back, Western Australia, Melbourne, Brisbane, and found myself working as an advisor for the Department of Communities, where a lot of my role focused on training communication partners to be better at what they did, assisting people who had complex communication needs. Unfortunately, the department got reorganized and a lot of us in senior positions went into private practice. And I personally didn't think anyone would want to go private, But along came the NDIS, and private therapy became much more affordable for people. So I offered a therapy service to people face to face. I also did rural and remote visits. And then increasingly, I started to do online consultations. And I suppose that's the time when Zoom really took off with the COVID pandemic. And a lot of my work now is Zoom related. But I still see people with a wide range of disabilities and a wide range of age groups who all have complex communication needs and who need a communication partner to assist them make their voice be heard. Now, one of the things I have done in recent years is to design an online training package of 5 courses to help people become better communication partners. And within that, I have found that there are a number of things that can accelerate progress and be really great tools for therapists. One of those is music, and I work very closely with neurologic music therapists and also the dog in therapy. So if I try to encapsulate what my role as a speech therapist is when I'm working with people who've got complex communication needs, I really have to have an understanding of the diagnosis, because you can't put a square peg in a round hole. Everyone is different.
Yes.
People with cerebral palsy have different needs to people with autism, who have different needs to people with acquired brain injury, and so on and so on. But one of the things that is most important to all of that is the ability for the therapist to be able to make herself or himself understood and to offer opportunities for the person with communication impairment to use methods other than speech. So in my work, I would use keyword signing, which is where I only sign the key word in a sentence. And I may also use a whole range of low-tech communication displays and low-tech communication equipment, as well as high-tech. That's communication equipment that can pick up the tiniest movement that the person may make, and that's sufficient to open opportunities to communicate with technology.
Sorry, can we just, so the low tech and high tech, what are some examples of each?
Actually, we're getting into that, so why don't I just explain that now? Okay.
Great.
So this probably is a good slide to explain what my role as a speech pathologist is. I'm looking at the communication partners, which I mentioned, who might be someone who is assisting the person with communication impairment. And I'm looking at how something else is used within conversation. It might be signing, or in this case, it's looking at a communication device. So how does the interaction go between the communication device, the communication partner, and the communication user? And I guess more recently now, I've discovered that that trio can be, how did everyone react with the therapy dog, the communication partner, and the therapist? Right? So it's something that is expanding in my my understanding.
So it sounds like you're using the
There's
same
also the
model, but you're swapping out the
yes,
communication device for the therapy dog.
yes. In my
And is that, sorry, Jane, is that common when you say a communication partner? Is that common for someone to be in speech therapy with someone else, like a support person, or is that someone from their family usually?
very, very, and the sad thing is that often it's not the family, unless it's for a younger child. It might be a support worker, and then we get such a turnover of staff these days
Oh, of
Yeah.
course.
that it's very hard to get the client making good progress if every time someone is learning how to do that and then they leave and we have to start again.
How
So
frustrating.
that's one of the frustrations and the challenges of my job. But in the course 5 of my training package, there was a conversation style that I identified in my PhD research. And I called that you, me, and something else. And when I did the research, I was thinking that the you, me, and something else was the communication device. But now I'm seeing that model with the therapy dog, and the therapy dog is the something else. Yes.
Very cool.
Yeah. It is cool. It's also really interesting, because the other thing I haven't mentioned that I am trained in is in discourse analysis and notation. So again, for my master's and my PhD was about transcribing everything in an interaction. Now that's the body language. Here comes my dance background, because we can transcribe dances so that they are repeated over generations in the same way, because we've got a way of notating all the movements. Okay.
Wow.
Transcribing the interaction so that we can actually see what everyone is doing within an environment. And what everyone does in one environment might be totally different to what they do in another environment. Why? All right, that's what we need to be asking. Okay. For example, this young boy, you might think he's got a headache, that he's crying, all right? And what he's been asked to do is just show me your sign for worried. So this is worried.
Oh, okay.
And something like that will come up again in a future slide, where we get surprises, all right? Now, he can't speak, so he's communicated that by pointing to icons on a communication display. We can't assume that because the person can't communicate, that they don't understand.
Yeah, right.
As you can see, the self-harming, the frustration of not being able to speak and people thinking that he has nothing to say is sometimes very overwhelming.
Oh, I literally have to speak all day long. So I don't know how people would be. Yeah, if I lost my speech, I would be totally lost.
It would be incredibly frustrating.
I think it was the World Health Organization that said the act of not being able to communicate or being incommunicado is the worst form of human torture.
Yeah, far out.
Having something to say and not being able to express it. Yeah. I can understand that.
So what I'd like to cover this evening, or whenever you're watching this, listening to this podcast, is just 4 of the main areas that I work as a speech pathologist and how I've incorporated my dogs into that. Okay, so if we have a look at the next slide, what I do with parents and support workers, friends, whoever is assisting the person in the clinic, is I want to help them share with me and develop the vocabulary that the person has. I want to develop awareness and use of eye contact. And that extends to people talking with the person with eye contact rather than around them. All right, you may have seen that, you may have witnessed that. Okay. To foster turn taking, because very often people with complex communication needs, it becomes more of an interrogation style instead of a conversation style. It's question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. And with that often comes huge topic shifts. So it might be, do you want something for dinner tonight? Okay, what are you going to watch on television? It was so-and-so on shift. And the poor person has gone across 3 different topics in one conversation. And in fact, it isn't a conversation at all. It's an interrogation. So I like to try and foster turn taking for conversation, but also socialization. So like playing games. And finally, to assist and support self-regulation, especially where much of the weakness in self-regulation is actually in the hands for success of the communication partners, not the person with the complex communication needs.
What a bizarre dynamic, really. What a bizarre therapy dynamic. That's so interesting to me, that it can be so caught up in, and like you say, support workers who, have, I'm sure, some invested interest, but probably not enough, really. How full on to have your life and therapy goals and outcomes in someone else's hands like that.
It's also interesting when you look at the and something else, and it's a communication device. If you're working with someone who's got a complex communication need and they're male, and the device has been programmed or not programmed for a male voice.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the person is speaking with a female voice because
so
maybe
simple.
it came like that in the package and no one's had the time to read the instructions and find out how to reprogram it for an age and gender appropriate voice.
Of course, yeah, age as well as gender.
Yeah.
That's just something,
Wow.
that I've never even considered or thought about before, but far out. That would just be so meaningful.
Well, one of the things that I find really meaningful, because a lot of the time I've worked with people who say, I don't think there's anything you can do for Johnny. And anyway, I know everything he wants to say, right? So in the next slide, you'll see what I actually do and what is proving really successful when it comes to having a therapy dog in my work, all right? So in this top table, this is called a communication dictionary. And what we do is we get the carer to write down what each word or signal is, how it is said, what it means, and what you can do as a communication partner to respond. Now, usually when I start to do this, people would say to me, well, there's not really much. There's probably only, 4 or 5 things that I know the body language means, or, so-and-so wants to communicate. And then we start, and we will easily find 3, 4, 5 times, 10 times more sometimes, signals that the person has. Now, a signal is, if you like, defined as a unit of meaning. So the person does something like turn their head very subtly to the left. You might miss it unless you know what you're looking for. What does it mean? Yes. How empowering is that?
Wow. Yes.
Amazing.
And that's a very important word in communication as well.
Yes. Okay. So we developed that communication dictionary for someone with a communication impairment. And then in one of my dog training lessons, there was something that looked like a communication dictionary. And it was just a list of the words, what did your dog understand? Tick them off. Okay. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do this. And I can maybe show the families, the support workers, other therapists, what I have done as a vocabulary for my dog. So when Bonnie offers her left paw, it's not high five. It's not, hey, here's my paw. Okay. She does a little skip movement. Okay. And it's only her left paw. My husband now says, no, it wasn't the left paw. She doesn't want help. Initially, I thought it was help me because she used it when there was a ball under the
yeah,
rocks outside.
Oh,
okay,
rocks,
and I couldn't see it, and she would do this little one. So I reinforced it.
Yep.
And now she uses it for help me. I want. All right. So I'm just putting that in. That's my interpretation.
Yeah.
So if I was to put her in a context like respite, someone else looks after her. I want that communication partner for her to know what her vocabulary is.
Yeah.
And a lot of this work has come from Christine Hunger's work on teaching Stella how to talk.
So cool.
Brilliant
She
book.
is amazing.
Written by a speech pathologist who works in the same area as me.
Cool. I've always wanted to read her book because it's so amazing, the stuff that she does, but I haven't gotten around to it. But I also am like, I don't know.
It is a brilliant book. A brilliant book. Yeah. And
it looks amazing.
It really helped me see the augmentative and alternative communication side much clearer. So I've got things there like the yawning, but I have said that for Bonnie, the yawning can be not a tired yawn. It can be a stress, but also that she's picking up on my stress. So in what you do, check me, check myself, and check the stress of the dog and remove or modify for either of us or both of us. But the last one is a real must. Okay. when she does beautiful eye gaze to the toilet roll, the shelf where they're kept, and you, it means I want an empty toilet roll. You do not give it to her. Okay?
Oh.
Now, Sheena has a vocabulary of 43 words now.
Oh,
Of 43 units of meaning.
That's
all right?
so cool.
And I think that's pretty cool.
So
I
cool.
think that's awesome.
It's amazing.
And it might inspire people. If my dog has 43, I'm sure your person
absolutely
has more than 2.
That's so cool.
Exactly.
That's so cool.
On the next slide, when I wrote this, I didn't have an example to give with this. I was just going to show you that there is a YouTube link so that you can look at dog language signals. But I was in a Zoom session last week with a young teenager in another state, and she had come to the session like this, with this deep furrowed brow. And I said, "You look as though maybe you've got a headache or you're unwell." And dog walks by, and I thought, okay, well, maybe this would be useful. I've just found a whole list of doggy behaviors, and I wonder how your dog might be feeling. And I was about to say something else, and she said anxious. So out of all of that, she had chosen anxious. So I said, are you anxious or something else? And those of us who work in this field often know that the person will echo the last thing you say. But she said anxious. So I said, are you anxious about the session with Jane or something else? The session with Jane.
Wow.
Do you want to stop, or do you think the work might be a bit tricky? And instead of going to that first one, now she's gone to the last one. So I'm getting a mixture.
Yeah.
And in the end, it just came down to reassuring her that the session was not going to be tricky. But if she found anything tricky, then we would just stop or wait or relax, and I would help her through it. And we had a really good session.
So cool.
So sometimes if people enjoy a dog's companionship so much, just like she does, then you can draw on even images of dogs, not having to have the dog there.
And do you think,
So
Jane,
that's
because I
helpful
think
for me.
I see a fair bit of this where, even just having, like, if everyone's looking at their screen, but even just having the images up, like what Lily Chen has done here with her little Boston Terrier, even just to validate and normalize, like, dogs feel the feelings too. Like, I find that even just that bit of externalizing of, and it just normalizes and validates so much. And, I find especially young people, they're so much more willing and likely to discuss emotions and things like that once I always do the dog stuff first. Like, I always talk about the dog's emotional state or whatever it is that we're learning, their social skills or whatever it is first. And I just find they're so much more likely to then discuss things for themselves. And sometimes I might just think I'm having a conversation with a young person, and that we're just going to, like, be able to talk about a topic, and then we'll get blocked and get stuck. Like, they'll get blocked. And then I'll go like, oh, that's right, I'm supposed to, like, talk about the dog first. And then I'll go back and, like, actually, you know what? Like, Nala, I think she, like, because Nala talks a lot. She's one of those talkative dogs. She's just constantly moaning and groaning at me about the mildest inconveniences of her life. But it's so cute. She just groans at me all the time. It's very cute, but it's also it's like a modeling thing as well. We talk about, like, she's expressing herself and her feelings and things like that. And I always try and validate her feelings. And, even just like those times when I've forgotten to discuss the dog first, I can still go back and talk about the dog. And then it just removes that blockage. I'd say like 99% of the time.
It obviously, like, I mean, for me, maybe not say obviously, but for me, I think it also brings a lot of clarity as well when you can point and there's some very clear differences and feelings. Like, if you're feeling distressed and you're not sure what it is, sometimes, like, being able to put the word to it is halfway there to working through it. If you're like, okay, what am I feeling? I don't know what I'm feeling. I'm feeling stressed. Oh no, I'm feeling anxious. Then from being able to identify what that is,
Yeah.
it makes it so much easier to move forward from that point.
And I think it's interesting to have a look at how a therapy dog is known, because some of the things is what we're talking about. They're like a stepping stone in a session, an accelerator, a catalyst, the glue that holds the session together. And the one that I liked most is probably the buffer.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Oh my gosh, my dogs buffer me
Yes.
so much.
Yeah.
Oh man,
Yes.
they buy me a lot of graces.
I think I've said in the article that goes with this, it shouldn't really have come of any surprise that 2 Christmases ago it was Charlotte that got the Christmas cards. Dear Charlotte,
Oh
thank you
yes,
for helping
every
me
year.
talk.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Aw.
Every year, yes, absolutely. They bring in Christmas presents for the dogs and stuff. It's very lovely.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
beautiful.
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, having a look at dogs and images then, if we have a look at the next slide, you'll just see what I did with my first therapy dog, Charlotte. And that was to make up a communication board with the dog-centered language, so that the child, it was mainly children I was working with then, so that the child could actually see her vocabulary and have a go at reproducing it either with signing or just by pointing. Okay, so where's she gone? She'd gone behind. Oh, yeah, you're right. She's gone behind the chair. What should we tell her to do? Maybe we tell her to come. Okay. So this was a way of, making sign language and using a communication display functional and fun.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, teaching the family or whoever the communication partners were. It also helps to use feedback when you're having a conversation. So on the bottom row, you've got all the awesome, great, terrific, wonderful. It doesn't matter. So if we do this as awesome, I don't want anyone saying, oh, I wonder what fantastic is. I wonder what wonderful is. It's the same.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Terrible. Okay. So this is bad. 2 of them terrible.
Okay.
But it's also dreadful, horrible,
Awful.
yucky. Okay.
All right. Yeah.
So we don't have to learn a whole lot of
Yes.
science. We're only talking about concepts.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Keeping it clear and simple. Yeah.
Clear, simple, and in a language that the dog knows as well as we know. So there are words that I have to choose very carefully, because either for auditory issues that the person may have or for literality of meaning. All right. So these are all fairly clear.
When you say auditory issues, what do you mean by that, Jane?
Well, in a couple of slides' time, you'll see Charlotte. Oh, no, it's the next slide. Yeah, okay, let's go to the next slide.
Just while we're swapping slides, I'm just
One
going to
of-
mention that I cannot believe that I've never put 2 and 2 together before, that we are using sign language when we talk to our dogs with our hand signals.
Yeah, neither.
I've never ever
Had not occurred to
considered
me.
that before. It has not occurred to
So
me
strange.
at all that because we always use hand signals with I've got so many hand signals, my dogs.
Yeah.
And even my facial expressions, like my dogs read
Yeah.
my facial expressions as well. But I'm like, have never put it together before. So this is really interesting.
I think one of the things I would really like to do is have a go at working with a deaf dog.
Oh yeah, we've trained
Just
deaf
because
dogs.
I've had to look at the deaf signing for
Mhm.
dogs. There is a deaf sign language for dogs, and just see how that compares.
We should put you in touch with that team.
I know nothing more about it. I can't say anything.
Yeah, no,
We
that
have-
would be so
We
interesting.
have a deaf dog and a therapy dog team. His name's Murphy, and he's a white dog, like a Bitzer, I'm pretty sure. We should track him down, and yeah, we should have a conversation about
Yeah,
that.
that would be
because
really
I was a little bit
interesting.
concerned about when they first came along, because I was like, how do we make this safe? But we have come up with different ways to make sure that Murphy's safe, and the people that Murphy's around are kept safe as well. And they've actually just done their reassessment as well, and they're still going great. So yeah, Anyway.
That's great to hear.
Okay, well, in that first photograph, Charlotte had learnt to touch according to the name of familiar toys. And when I was doing some auditory discrimination work, so point to the cat, point to the rat, point to the frog, point to the log, okay, gets really boring, okay. So we just had Charlotte do some. So I would hold up two objects, which are the wonderful IKEA. I don't know what we'd do without IKEA toys. They're quite durable. Her cat and her rat. And I would just say, show me cat. Now I'm doing the presentation because this is what I want the families to do, because often what the families do is there's this one and this one. Show me the cat. And they're looking at it. Okay.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm trying to show them how the presentation works for that as well.
Okay.
And then she'd touch it. Okay, now they might give an applause, they might do something, but we could then talk about, well, how do we give feedback? Do we tell her, good, can you get your thumb up? Okay. Or can you get 2 thumbs up? You know, let's tell her. All right. We might do question and answer. How would she feel if she got it wrong? Now, that was a beautiful one. That really got everyone going. Because when you're on Zoom, you can't see the hand signals that are going on down here. So even if I get a treat and I bring it down here, they see the dog's head go down. So if you get your timing right, how do you think Charlotte would feel if she got it wrong? Oh, look, she put her head down. Maybe she's maybe she's sad. Okay. But it holds attention, which is the next thing we're going to talk about. And Zoom is hard work. Being in a face-to-face session can be hard work. You've got to continually come up with things to hold attention, to motivate, and to get results ultimately. Okay?
Yeah, of course.
And as one little boy said, well, you got that wrong, didn't you? Duh. So we'll then talk about, tell her in a nice, polite little way, please. Right, so let's have a look at attention and eye contact. Okay, so this slide again shows the Charlotte. Okay, there she is in the middle, and she was just helping me with articulation work. What we're learning there is that the V sound is not where you bring your lower lip under. Wrong movement. You're going to bring your jaw back, and then your lip will go under naturally. It's a natural motor movement rather than a forced movement, okay? So I'm saying that you've got to be like Shah and really watch carefully, because it's not that. It's just a little movement of my jaw to get that sound. And she always performed really well to the screen. So when Bonnie came along, that eye contact I knew was going to be something that we really had to work on for on screen. Really have to look at me and look at people on screen. So she will quite happily now watch David Attenborough program for an hour.
Oh my God.
And respond differently to all the animals.
Oh my God.
And I think Doghouse is probably the best program that's ever been invented.
Oh my goodness.
She actually, I think, is going to know Monday night is Doghouse night.
That's so cute.
I love that.
But the attention and the eye contact is also interesting when I'm working with people who don't make eye contact, who attend in different ways.
Yeah.
And that they see no point in looking at someone for communication.
Yeah.
And this was brought home to me by the little boy who said, when we'd explained about this is how you show that you're attending. Wow, you mean that I got all those detentions just because I didn't look at the teacher and she thought I wasn't listening? I was.
Yeah.
Now I've started to do some notation description there. So when the kid shouts, it's in bold. When it's underlined, it's syllable stress. All right. So that helps you as a reader see how the message was communicated. Right. So
Jane,
Last
how did
one,
you
self-regulation.
how did you teach the dogs to look at the screen?
She has found, you should see her right now, she's asleep. I don't know why she does this, Sam, but since I got her, if I sneeze, she comes running.
Wow.
So, yeah, and it would happen now if not only if I sneeze, if I make a loud, and she'll come. And she'll come from inside the house and come up. So when she started to do that as a puppy, she'd come up and she'd see that I was on screen and she'd express interest.
Mm-hmm.
So then we did put David Attenborough on and dog programs because she was reacting to animals, especially the Brevecto Border Collie. So I don't think I've actually done a lot there. She
Just
seemed
reinforced
to do it and I reinforced it.
Yeah. I think that's the easiest way as well. Like,
there has never been any treats with Bonnie to look at the screen.
Yeah, okay.
That is just me. She's looking at herself. She's a vain girl. She'll sit on the bed and she'll look at herself in the wardrobe mirror. So she just seems to be one of those. So I think you might be able to train that. I'm sure you would. But I think we've also got to observe the dog, see what it does naturally and develop it.
Yeah. Create
Yeah.
opportunities.
It's natural.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay. I just know people will be thinking,
So,
how do I teach my dog to do that?
Yes.
Well, if she wouldn't, and I was going to be stuck on Zoom, then I guess I would get the treat and put it up there. But I don't really, I didn't have to.
Yeah, cool.
Now, what I had seen Charlotte do is settle down and just be there. All right. And in being there, I noticed that people attended longer. And that's not me that's just noticing that. That's in the literature.
Yeah.
So it's non-judgmental. It's non-judgmental to disrupted speech, to disrupted behavior, and to poor reading skills. And what I have heard from one of my clients is that when her son was assessed for reading, let's say it's out of 30, he got 10 out of 30. When he was able to hug his little toy, he got 25 out of 30. So that anxiety hormone chemical balance thing is something that the therapy dog, I'm sure, can assist with so that the person is more in control of their learning and has a better chance of having a higher self-esteem.
Yeah.
That photograph was taken when I just turned around with my iPad. I was just in the clinic. And there was the little boy doing his animal yoga. And there was her looking at the page and being part of the engagement. No one put her there.
So cool.
She was just there. Yeah. It was so cool. And I don't think we should underestimate the role of just being there when it comes to having a therapy dog in the clinic.
I talk a fair bit, Jane, as well, like probably on this topic too, of like the co-regulation stuff that's happening from the dogs as well. Like I really find that if the dog is regulated within the space, that is what helps regulate the space and therefore the child or the client that's in the space. It's easier for them to regulate as well. I know it's like a big part of our job as a clinician as well, to be able to hold the space in that way. But I just find that the dogs they're so steady with it. Like they're so predictable and reliable. And if you got the right dog, which is why, when we're training these dogs, that's why we're aiming for a dog that has that disposition and they enjoy this kind of work so that they are regulated within the space. I find it's very beneficial for the client.
It's interesting too, because when Bonnie is playing here with her best friend, who's a 9-month-old Swiss Shepherd, when I'm here, I can guarantee that they're going to be black. They're going to be covered in mud.
Oh, yeah.
But for the first time, we left them alone with my husband, who just potters around slowly. When we came home, we had 2 clean dogs. And he said they had just potted around. They're
Wow.
just sniffing around. And
What?
wow, okay, I better slow down. Because they're picking up that energy.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess my 4 work ethics are my 4 C's, which is on the next slide. And that's to try and be calm, very, very hard in a busy clinic. To always have an element of cheerfulness, companionship, and care for everyone in the pattern of your work.
Absolutely.
Whether it's a duo, a trio, or a group.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there are huge implications for a speech therapist if you get this right. You're not going to get better results for things like language development, but you're also going to get better results for self-esteem and motivation. And you'll see better results over time if you can do this with people having fun and enjoying coming to the session.
Yeah.
So they're motivated. It's not a negative encounter that focuses on their disability. It focuses on what they can do.
Big difference.
And if they're relaxed and if they're regulated, then they're going to find the words more easily to express themselves, because communication, speech, signing, pointing, it's movement driven. And if we upset that arousal level or energy level, whatever you want to call it, we all know that sometimes when we're angry, when we're upset, we can't move as well as we would if we were relaxed. We can't sign as well, speak as well, produce voice as well, move as well. Okay. So just think about yourself on a dance floor. Okay. If all of a sudden you've got something that upsets you, you're not going to be very much in rhythm or beat or sequence. Okay.
Yeah, right.
So ultimately it's about enjoyment, to reduce anxiety and make things happen.
Some of these kids too, like, you know, you mentioned before, like you see kids as well with challenging behaviors and stuff, or clients. I find sometimes my kids, particularly when I was, you know, a bit more early career, they would dysregulate me with their, you know, wound up engine cyclone kids coming through your room, and they're just so off the chain. And it's like a constant, you feel like you're following them around and they're like just destroying everything you own. And you're trying to teach them something. And it's so hard to, like, you know, get their engagement and attention and concentration for longer than like 3 seconds for some of these kids. When you're working, like, I really found having such steady dogs. So like my Labradors are best for this. My Border Collie Oliver's not as good. He would be like, no, thank you to the energy. But my Labs, I just found I was able to just rely on them so much to take the wheel, Sonny, and have a break and collect myself and go, okay, like, and they would just play, or, you know, instead of me following this kid around, it's Sonny following them around, or, you know, things like that, and have a chance to collect myself and go, okay, take a breath, regulate yourself first, then we can move on, come up with a bit of a plan and move on. And once I found that I was able to just flip and relax, I found that the kid slows down. So without the dog there to buffer me, I would have found that really hard because of the way that my energy is as well. I just like can't thank the dogs enough for that buffering, that, like that word that you used before, that buffering that they have done in order to help me get the space calm so that we can get exactly what you're talking about. That cheerfulness of in the session, like, it is so stressful sometimes being a therapist, particularly working with these demographics. We just want to, like, the more that we can enjoy this time and have fun learning and things like that. But it's hard for these kids. That learning's hard. They're frustrated. They don't want to do it. Like, they know that they can't do it as well as whoever else, and that kind of stuff. And like you're talking about, that self-esteem stuff comes into it. It's a whole big thing. If I didn't have the dog to buffer me for a hot minute so I could flip and relax, so that I could, co-regulate the space and then have fun with these kids, I just think there's no way that we would have gotten the outcomes that we've been able to achieve, and the companionship and the care as well. So thanks for sharing these 4 C's. That's really cool.
Fun is such a key word in that too. Sorry, I was just going to say fun is such a key word in that too, with dogs in particular. They really know how to find that sweet spot.
Absolutely.
I guess I feel driven to say that I wish speech therapists would be more aware of getting this balance, because I know that there are therapists out there, and I was one of them, who would think, if you don't do this, tick, 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 then you haven't done your job. Yeah. Relax, play with the child. So then we have completely the other swing, and then we get parents saying, the last one only played with him.
Yeah.
There has to be the balance between, hey, look, this is relaxing, it's fun, it's enjoyable, and as a result, you are learning this, and this, or I can see you could do this, and this.
Yeah.
So it has to be seen by the public to be research driven if necessary, but have consequences. It's not all about like the petting zoo. I can't have people in my clinic for sessions with the therapy dog. And by the way, I'm going to bring the neighbors' kids because they really want to see her because she's so sweet. That's not going to happen.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
Really important.
You have to work within this context to get the balance and feel that the therapy dog is part of your toolkit. It's evidence-based, it's research-driven. It just needs you to take that opportunity, take the training, and get some experience of seeing if the dog can complement what you're doing.
Yep. That's such an important point. And it goes back to what you're saying before, Jane, about don't underestimate them just being there. Like, you don't have to force the dog you don't have to force an animal assisted intervention. Don't stress. Just do your job. Just engage your client and just do your job like you normally would. And if something pops up and the dog becomes a more active part of the session, then that's fantastic. But I see people trying to force it, or they're really beating themselves up over the fact that like they just can't think of what to do with the dog. I'm like, just don't worry. Just don't stress. As long as your dog isn't detracting from you being able to do your job as a professional, don't stress, because the impact of them just being there is the most important thing. But as you relax and calm down into it and have fun with it, those interventions will come that, and, we've got PD options and things like this now where we can have these discussions and get ideas, but those things will come as long as we all just like relax, guys.
Because if you can't relax, then you're not going to observe.
Correct.
No.
Yeah.
Exactly. You'll be too worried about how you're feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Very cool, Jane. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jane, for spending this time with us today and talking us through just this even tiny amount of what you're doing with your dog. We are so happy to have you as one of our teams, and I'm just excited by, we must have just spent, I guess, about 45 minutes or something having a chat, and I just learnt like heaps of stuff. So I'm really happy about that. And I know that there's other speechies out there that, want to continue to further this field in the respectful way that you are. So can people reach out to you if they'd like some guidance? Can you do supervision? Is that a thing?
Absolutely. They can go to the website, which is www.optionsctc, so options, Charlie Tango Charlie.com, and they'll get all the information they need there. But thank you very much for having
Thank
me.
you so much. This has been very enlightening. I feel like I've learnt so much. I'm going to be dreaming
Same.
about it
I feel like
tonight.
I've learned heaps. I feel like I've learned so much,
Thank
and
you.
I love having these conversations with other professionals and, you know, other animal assisted therapists and things like that, whether they're in your field or, you know, another field. It's so cool to see what people are doing, and it's so cool to apply the same principles across different disciplines. We're just generalizing our knowledge, which is, you know, where we need to be moving forward as an industry to continue offering. I'm really passionate that we're, you know, offering a professional service and we're all working within the scope of our existing fields and of it, you know, offering these evidence-based opportunities for people. It's pretty exciting, and to hear the things that, you know, you've been able to teach your dogs to do, and it's pretty impressive. So please do, guys, get in touch with Jane, even if you're not a speechy, but if you want to pick her brain a bit more, get in touch with her and organize some consulting time. Make the most of it. Thank you so much, Jane.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. If you're interested in studying with Therapy Dogs Australia, or you have a few more questions before deciding, please get in touch with us by emailing courses@therapydog.com.au or visiting our website at www.therapydog.com.au for more information and FAQs.